We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown. Marshall and Western Kentucky.
Intercepted by Key, and Key has one man and beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
Here comes Talik Keaton to the sideline midfield. He's to the 40, gets a block, and he is gone! Touchdown, Marshall!
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome back to the regular season finale edition of the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Stephen, once again, will be late to the party, but Trace and I are here now, and I guess that means we're going to have to talk Herd football and senior day in Huntington. The FIU Golden Panthers came to town. Dreary, rainy, wet, nasty day, Trace, in Huntington. I know you were in the stands. I saw the social media feed that proves you were there, and and not enjoyable other than that it was a victory and an overtime victory for the Herd to boot. 30-27. Marshall gets the win over FIU, which brings Marshall's season record to 8-4, 6-2 in conference. They did their part, Trace. They kept pace with FAU. They really, really needed Southern Miss to pull one out and beat FAU in Boca Raton, but it just was not to be. So the Herd will miss out on representing the Eastern Division in the Conference USA title game. Speaking of overtime, that brings the Herd's all-time record to 9-7 in overtime games. And I believe this was the first overtime game for the Herd to be played in Huntington since some late November game in 2014. That was a conclusion to a very, very epic shootout that some may recall ended in a final score 67-66. So let's talk about those four indicators for the game. A little bit of a mixed bag here, but the Herd ultimately prevailed, so it is what it is. FIU actually outgained Marshall 322-290. 33 minutes, 17 seconds time possession for Marshall, just 26-43 for FIU. Marshall gets more first downs than FIU, 23-17. Turnovers are a push, one apiece. I don't know what's been going on with this Herd offense lately, but 290 yards is not something that we're really accustomed to seeing. But these last couple weeks, it's been subpar based on season averages. But the Herd did take a 10-7 lead in the halftime at this game, and they scored 14 points in the second half, Trace, something that I know you love to talk about. But we've got to talk about what happened in a very, very critical series that took place really under a minute to start the fourth quarter. FIU had a pretty sustained drive to end the third quarter, and they plunged the ball in there on the first play of the fourth quarter to get them a touchdown, and then on the ensuing kickoff, the Herd gets it's a touchback for FIU. Herd takes over to 25. First play, Green fumbles on a 4-yard loss. FIU picks it up. Boom, next play, 22-yard touchdown. So the Golden Panthers scored 2 touchdowns in a span of 12 seconds to start the fourth quarter, and that got them right back into the ball game. And it was kind of a grinder for the fourth quarter. But, a little bit of the clutch gene came out when it needed to. Marshall went down the field there with, just over 2 minutes to go, scored the touchdown, I think, with like 2:18, 2:17, something like that. A nice 18-yard touchdown pass from Isaiah Green to Xavier Gaines, who was really just wide open in the corner of the end zone. I don't know how the heck that happened. But her defense could not hold and allowed FIU to go right down the field and get themselves a field goal to force overtime. Really clutch kick, actually, by I think his name's Borgalis, the FIU kicker. Really clutch kick. I mean, time winding down, under a minute to go, rainy, soggy, cruddy conditions, and he banged it through. And they iced him. Twice? Was it? Did they do it twice?
Twice, yeah. Twice.
and I think it was good from something like 42 or something like that. So really clutch kick for that kid. But probably the greatest call, and I tweeted this, of all the calls of the career, the illustrious career of Herd center Levi Brown. He went out for the overtime coin toss. Herd wins the toss, and Levi says, "We want to play defense." And I heard it on the radio broadcast, plain as day. And, the Herd plays defense. They couldn't hold FIU scoreless. They did get the field goal. But, just as soon as it started, it was over for FIU because Marshall took the ball over on their overtime possession. And first down play, 24-yard run by Brendan Knox down to the 1. Second play, boom, right over Kane Madden and Levi Brown for the 1-yard touchdown. Game over. Herd wins in overtime. Couldn't have been any shorter or any sweeter unless, Knox could have just rumbled for one more yard on that first down play, but you'll take it. So, what about the game, Trace? I know you got a little bit of a problem with the attendance in the game, being that it was senior day and everything. So I'm going to let you talk about that, and then we'll talk about some stats.
Yeah, just as far as the game itself goes, this is a good win. Especially for senior. When it's senior day, you don't like to lose for them. You got to get the win for the seniors and all the effort they put into the program, and they deserve to win. And 8-4 is a lot different than 7-5. To me, that's a pretty big difference, even though it's only one game difference. But if you look at it, 8-4 is 4 games over 500. 7-5 is 2 games. So 7-5 means you're basically average plus 1 game. So 8-4 looks a lot better. But to your point about the crowd, okay, so 16 years. My first game that I went to for a Marshall home game was the Toledo game in 2003, which resulted in a loss, ironically. But since then, I've gone to a lot of Marshall home games, you might say, and haven't missed one since 2010. And that was by far the smallest crowd I've ever seen at Marshall. It literally was like a high school crowd. It was absolutely embarrassing. The weather sucked, and I understand all that. And honestly, there wasn't a whole lot enticing about the game besides just the fact that it was a home game and it was the senior day and everything. But God bless, that crowd was horrendous. You could have filled up. Put it this way: I sat on the press box side. The other side of the stadium, you could have literally put everybody on that side into one section, and they would have fit for sure, without a doubt. And then they had the gall to announce it at 18,000 plus. I'm like, what a freaking joke! There weren't 5,000 people there. If there was 5,000, maybe 5,000 at the most. It was utterly embarrassing. Just a bad look, and that's something Mike Hammer's going to have to take into consideration because, the weather sucks and everything, but, there's a big reason. It's more than just people not showing up because of the weather sucking. There's more to it than that. But that's another story for another day. But, as far as the game goes, it was a good win. It got really dicey there in the fourth quarter. Marshall was up 17-7 and had a really good, had a lot of momentum going. But right on cue, they let that long touchdown drive go, and then Isaiah Green just drops a snap, just point blank drops it. And then the next play, FIU scores and goes up. That was a 14 points in 20 seconds or something like that. So at that point, I was like, oh, here we go. This is going to be just a typical letdown game. The crowd's going to attendance or people on social media is going to be going crazier than they already are. But no, but thankfully enough, though, they pulled it out. They pretty much had to because the offense was absolutely abysmal in the fourth quarter up until the very end. That offense couldn't do crap in the fourth quarter. No, there's just no other way you can say it. They could not string together any kind of drives at all. And on that drive that they scored the touchdown on late, there was 3 or 4 penalties for FIU on that drive. So they had about 30 to 40 yards in penalty yards on that drive. That helped them out significantly. And then, of course, Xavier Gaines got wide open there in the end zone. And then the overtime was really cool because, they held them to the field goal. So obviously now, you have to get at least a field goal. And then I'm just glad that it wasn't drawn out. They just punched it in pretty much right off the bat. No drama about it. The 2 plays and they were in. So that was good to see. And good way to end the regular season. But, at the end of the day, everybody is disappointed because they're not playing for a championship yet again. So that's another big reason why nobody showed up because they knew the game really. They technically at that point were still alive, but not really anybody thought they had a chance to get there. So I don't know. It's a good win, good way to go out for those seniors and everything, and hopefully they can get a good bowl destination and bowl opponent. But it's still going to be another season of should-haves, and that's just the trend, unfortunately.
Well, it's a bummer because 11 points is what ultimately is going to keep Marshall out of the Conference USA title game because of that loss and margin of victory at Charlotte when the Herd controlled their own destiny. So, that's a tough pill to swallow, and there was a hangover to this week, and it's apparent by butts in seats. And, there will be some bickering. I've seen tons of bickering on the social media just along my timeline at all about, your school, not you personally, Trace, but the school of thought of, what it means to be a fan and if you should go and, if it means you're a less of a fan if you don't go and situations like that. And, ultimately I can see both sides of the coin, but when it comes down to it, I've always been of the school of thought that I am free and clear to spend my money how I want to spend my money. And if I choose to go, then I'll go. And if I choose not to go, then I choose not to go. And it doesn't make me any less of a fan because I don't want to sit in the cold, rainy, dreary weather and risk getting sick for the holidays or, my children missing school or me having to miss work or whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that my support for our, players is any less, but, I don't know. Everybody has their own opinion on what it means to be a fan. And if you're one of those folks that is, thinks it's okay to miss a game from time to time, that's fine. If you're one of those people that think if you don't stay from, 30 minutes before kickoff until you're one of the last people to leave the stadium and you never miss a game and you can travel to all the away games, and then okay, but not everybody wants to do that or can do that. But anyway, let's talk stats. Isaiah Green, 9 of 20 for 90 yards and 1 touchdown, 12 carries for -3 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground, and of course that 1 fumble. Brendan Knox, 33 carries for 146 yards and a touchdown. Xavier Gaines, 5 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown, and 1 catch, the 18-yard touchdown reception. Obi Obialo, the leading receiver in both receptions and yards, 5 for 31. Omari Cobb, 10 tackles, 2 solo, 1 pass defended, and 1 quarterback hurry is your leading tackler for the Herd defense on the day. Stephen Gilmore and Tavante Beckett, both 8 tackles apiece. Gilmore 4 solo, Beckett 2 solo, and adding on also a pass defended, a quarterback hurry, and an interception. So great all-around day for Tavante Beckett and Omari Cobb. If these guys don't both land on the first team all-conference, I don't know, man. They rank both of them like very high nationally. I think the Beckett's like 14th or something like that nationally in tackles. And Cobb is just half a tackle per game behind him, but that half a tackle like drops him down to like 40th nationally. You know what I mean? Yeah. But these dudes just having a phenomenal. I mean, to think about this time a year ago, we were talking about, or not even a year ago, but just a few months ago, we were talking about this linebacking unit and having to replace Hernandez and having to place Hancock and those several other guys, and now we're talking about Tavante Beckett and Omari Cobb potentially looking like first team all conference players, and that's even taking into consideration the week 1 loss of Jaquan Yulee. So This is a big time step up for these two guys. Congratulations on a great season for sure. So let's talk special teams. Justin Rowasser, 1 of 2 on field goals, 3 of 3 on extra points. And Robert Lefevre, 5 punts for a 45.4-yard average and a long of 58. I did see that earned him Conference USA Special Teams Player of the Week honors this week. So let's talk about some grades, Trace. What do you got for the quarterback this week?
Well, it's slightly more kind than it was last week, but like it's still not the best grade. I went with a C-. I mean, he literally has 15 completions last 2 games total. I mean, I know the weather sucked both times, but man, 15 completions in the last 2 weeks, and it's not like Marshall's a run first team, like a primarily run team. Like they throw the ball, but like he's got 15 completions in the last 9 weeks. But I mean, or last 2 weeks, sorry. But this game right here he came alive when it mattered. But I mean, if you just look at the stats, I mean, 9 for 20 is under 50%, 90 yards. I mean, one touchdown, which came at a very timely fashion because they were down and they had to get it. He had no interceptions, but he had a really bad fumble on a snap that just hit him square in the hands. I mean, it couldn't have been any better of a snap, and he just dropped it, and that led to FIU getting the lead beginning of the fourth quarter. QBR was only 38.5, so that's, obviously below average. But really the only reason I'm giving him a C- is because that touchdown late was big, and like he had some couple throws there, especially in the fourth quarter that he made, but it wouldn't have been, if they would have lost the game, he would have probably got more like an F, honestly. But I mean, it was a okay, maybe okay game from him. But I mean, whether you got to take that into consideration a little bit. But like the other guys or whoever,
both teams play in the same weather.
I was going to say the other quarterback for FIU didn't do too bad either. So he did pretty good for the weather. So can't really use that like some people like to use. But so C-, I guess is.
So here's what it is. It's 15 out of 37 for 176 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and 1 fumble combined for the last 2 weeks of the season when the Herd needed 2 wins. Okay, and here's my take on that. Now, I'm not picking on Isaiah Green as a person at all or as a player at all, but if we have staff turnover at Marshall, which we always seem to see in the offseason, some assistant, moves along or something. There's always somebody. At this point, after you've seen the resume of work and performances this season, Trace, how can you not justify using one of those assistant spots if it gets vacated to finding yourself a dedicated quarterback coach?
For the love of God.
It's quite obvious that Marshall needs one. I'm not saying that's the difference in being in the Conference USA title game this year or not. But
it's a big difference.
You couldn't tell me that it wouldn't have helped the chances,
Oh yeah.
So I just don't get why. I mean, if it's so important of a position, and you look at like the Herd's assistant coaches, and the coaches they have are great. And I'm not saying you got to get rid of somebody to get one, but if somebody moves along, then you try to make that move. But I don't understand why you got to have a safeties coach and a cornerbacks coach, or you have to have a defensive tackles coach and a defensive ends coach. Every position's important, but none are more important than the quarterback. So if you've got a quarterback that needs a little bit of tutelage, go find a specialist to work with the man,
Hey, you want to know who had a dedicated quarterbacks coach in the last few years? Ricky and Cato. Try that. Freaking, are you kidding me right now? Tony Peterson.
It's true. He did have one. So, all right. Offensively as a whole, only 290 yards, but you do possess the ball for over half the game. You put together there's no way to say it, but a kick-ass overtime drive, 2 plays, 25 yards. And they did rack up 23 first downs. So what's the grade for the offense this week?
Yeah, I went with a C+. And honestly, I wrote down that they scored 30 points. And honestly, it really makes me wonder how the heck they actually managed to score 30 points because they were struggling through a lot of this game. I mean, 290 total yards. That's 2 straight weeks of under 300, which is not good. 90 yards passing, but on the contrary of that, they had 200 rushing. I mean, Brendan Knox, just an absolute workhorse performance. I mean, they're starting to, drag him to the ground. He's getting so many carries, 33 carries, but he's having to do it because they have no passing game right now, or at least in the conditions of weather they don't. But offense did have the 1 turnover, which was all Green. I mean, sorry, but I don't like calling out people, but that was all him. They were +7 in time of possession, so that was good. They managed to keep the ball. But at the end of the day, they're just too streaky and too inconsistent. But that's been the case for 4 years now. So, I mean, might as well keep it going. And I mean, but to their credit, they did make it count when it mattered. Down 21-17, they managed to score the go-ahead touchdown. managed to score in overtime. So like they did it when it mattered. That's the only reason I give it a C plus. If it wasn't for those two drives, much like Green's grade, if they wouldn't have won the game, it would have been a lot lower, and the grade would have been that. The same goes for the offense. But because they won, because they made some clutch plays at the end, I'll go C plus.
Well, we got to talk about Brendan Knox just like we did with Isaiah Green. Over the last 2 weeks, 57 total carries for 238 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 catches for 43 yards.
It's crazy.
They are absolutely feeding him, yes, but and we said that, so we don't really have the luxury to say, well, you guys said feed him the ball. They're feeding him the ball. You can't say give him the ball less. Well,
yeah,
I get that, but man, 33 carries, that's a lot of carries.
Yeah.
But if that's the only thing getting you any positive yardage, you kind of got to ride it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Kinda.
these kind of numbers also, again, speak to the offensive line and the job they're doing in the run block game. They're doing pretty well in pass protection as well. I mean, they're not giving up a ton of sacks. FIU had 3, but that's not huge. You can tell that there's opportunity there. There's but it's just not materializing through the air. So how about defensively? What do you got this week?
Yeah, I thought the defense played real solid. I'm going to say B+. I mean, they gave up 27 points, which, I mean, that's not outstanding, but that's certainly not bad. I mean, and of course, some of those points, well, one of those touchdowns was just because they were dealt a bad hand because of Green's fumble, and then they were at like the 20-yard line or whatever it was. So, like, that was not on the defense obviously at all. They only gave up 322 total yards. That's not bad. 240 passing, which 82 rushing. They absolutely shut down FIU's run game, which I've noticed the whole game. Every time FIU tried to run, they pretty much couldn't go anywhere. That was impressive. That was very shades of the 2018 Marshall D line that just dominated everybody against the run. They got 1 interception, 1 sack, 2 TFLs, 9 passes defended, 8 quarterback hurries, so pretty good stuff there. But they did at times, though, whenever Magoo, the quarterback for FIU, whenever he went out, they brought in that backup.
Magoo's long gone, man. This is Morgan.
Oh, God, it is, isn't it? Oh, see, that's how much I keep up with FIU. Morgan, yes. When Morgan went out, they kind of struggled with the mobile quarterback that came behind him, but that wasn't very long. But, overall, though, defense played pretty good. It was definitely a solid game, and I'm sorry, FIU fans. I apologize for my misstep there. But Marshall's defense gets a B+, even though Magoo's gone.
Yeah. Even though
how it is.
Yeah, he's long gone. All right. So special teams is one you've been banging the drum on pretty much all year. So what do you got this week?
Yeah, in back-to-back weeks, you could make the argument that the special teams have had 2 of their better performances the whole year. And I'm going to say A- this week. Last week, I thought it was maybe the best overall of the year, especially given the weather and the crappiness going on with the rain. Well, there was more crappiness this week, and they managed to put forth a really solid overall day. The only reason I give it an A- is because Rohrwasser missed one of his field goals. But, he was still 1 of 2. And then, of course, look at Lefevre, special teams player of the year player of the week in the conference. 45.5 yards per punt, long of 58 in that rain and cold. That's impressive. Brock Thompson had a good punt return there. He almost broke it loose. He returned to 10 yards, I think, but it was a lot longer. It seemed like it was a lot longer than that. He was really close to breaking loose. Sheldon Evans, first kickoff return of the game. He took it all the way about midfield, about a 45-yard return. They had good kickoffs. They managed to boot him deep. They didn't let him return any. Kickoff return defense, we know how bad it's been, but thankfully they, limited it. They didn't really give up anything there. So really, this would be a flat-out A if it wasn't for the 1 missed field goal. But other than that, though, they were really good on the whole overall scale for the game. So I'm going to say A-.
All right. Hey, fair. They needed a good, solid closeout performance on the season, on the regular season anyway, so it's good to get it now on senior day. The coaching effort. I got a feeling this is kind of a mixed bag for you. You get a win, but I just let me hear it.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, but I'm gonna say I went with a B. That's what I went with. There was another kind of a slow start. Obviously didn't even score any points in the first quarter, so you don't really like to see that. The offense was pretty vanilla, but you understand that this is with a quarterback that's struggling a lot. and with the rain and everything, you don't want to necessarily, look like some flashy offense that's going to throw it 50 times. But, I mean, I still would like to have seen more from that because, I mean, like I said last week, Charlotte, even though the rain and crap was bad last week, Charlotte played pretty aggressive offensively, and look what it did for them. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that. First series of the game, Marshall had it. They got it down to the 35-yard line, the plus 35. It was 4th and 3, and Doc punted. I was like, oh, my God, Doc, why? Why do you do this every week? Punting from the 35, plus 35, 4th and 3. Give me a break. I was not happy about that. The high school crowd there wasn't happy about it. But to the coach's credit, though, I did like how they fed Brendan Knox. I mean, we've been calling for that all year. And God, they overfed him. Fittingly around Thanksgiving, they overfed Brendan Knox this game. Yeah. 33 carries, but like you said, it kind of had to happen because the offense wasn't doing anything outside of him really, so they kind of had to do that. And then they did run that Statue of Liberty type play, the touchdown that went to Xavier Gaines, I believe, wasn't it him on the reverse or whatever it was?
Yeah.
That was a good play. It worked really well. The blocking was good. That was really the only call that I can think of that actually impressed me the whole game as far as creative and stuff. And then, of course, too conservative. That's the Doc brand, trying to sit on the lead, trying to win time possession, trying to do this, 1980s football, whatever. And then, but they did finish strong, though. They got them to finish strong, so that's a good sign. But, I mean, you're right off the bat. But it's kind of a mixed bag. But, like, there really wasn't anything that bad, even though I hated that punt from the 35 thing. Barf. But coaching was pretty good, so I'll just say B.
All right. I totally forgotten about the punt from the 35.
What a joke.
All right, so overall, you close out senior day with a win. Herd moves to 8-4. You do get 30 points on the board, which seems to be that magic number for this podcast this year. Mixed bag up and down the board, but what do you got overall for week 14 for the Herd?
Yeah, I went with a B- overall. I mean, it was a pretty good game. I mean, overall, like they did some good things, but like there was a lot that I wish I would have seen. I wish I would have seen, more aggressiveness, which whatever. I wish I would have seen better offensive production at times. Would have obviously liked to have seen Isaiah Green play better. He did not play a very good game, despite my slightly below average grade. He kind of played worse than that, but like I just gave him the benefit of the doubt because of the last couple drives or whatever. Defense was solid. I mean, they were definitely a bright spot, but even they weren't great overall per se. Special teams I thought were really good, besides the one missed field goal. But I mean, overall though, it was definitely kind of one of those B-ish games. But like, I don't know, it just the whole atmosphere and like the fact there was nobody there in the crowd and like it was rainy and nasty and stuff, like it kind of just was hard to like. That game was ultimately going to be hard to leave a good taste in your mouth. So like that's kind of where I am with it. And the fact that Marshall ended up not playing for the conference championship, that leaves a bad taste. So like I'm going to say B- just because, all that stuff kind of factored that in as well.
All right. I mean, that's a pretty decent, solid effort to close out the season. I mean, and it doesn't hurt that it was a win. So you're right. I like 8-4 better than 7-5. It just seems like it just has a better look. And obviously it has a better look because it's a better record, but for some reason it just separates a little bit more from the average. I don't know what it is, but you're right about that. So here's a kicker question. So what do we know about Marshall after the regular season is now that the regular season has concluded? Please don't hit me with the obvious that we know that Marshall's not in the conference title game.
Well, that definitely applies, and God knows we all know by this point. But I ended up, for this, I thought that we know now that, which we've kind of known this for a while, but we know that the offense has ultimately cost Marshall this year, and it's been costing the last few years. The bad trend. I mean, they have way too many players offensively to be this average. I mean, they're averaging like 25 points a game. Like, really? 25 points a game? Like how, and I remember there was an article, one of the I think it's like Thundering Herd Illustrator, whatever the magazines that they get, that the Big Green members get. I don't even know what it's called. I get them every month or every few months or whatever. But I remember one before the season started saying, I don't exactly remember what the phrase was, but like basically talking about how the sky's the limit for the Marshall offense and like how they're going to, have a really good year or whatever. Get out of here with that crap. 25 points a game. Give me a break. I mean, and that's the problem is since Rakeem Cato graduated, they have really struggled to find an identity offensively. I mean, they have one this year. It's Brendan Knox, but like you got to have more balance, or not balance necessarily, but you got to have more than just a running back being your top guy. You got to have the quarterback balling out. You got to have the receiver stepping up. And since Rakeem Cato graduated, Marshall's, and this is currently without, minus the bowl game, of course, Marshall's average ranking of scoring offense in the FBS since Cato graduated is 74th. All right. Like that's below average. Like average will be around the 60s. That's below average offensive scoring for 5 years.
Yeah.
Not gonna do it. And then on the flip side of that, the average defensive scoring defense per game in the FBS is 40th, and that's taking into consideration when they were 107th in the country in 2016. So like defenses have been carrying them the last few years, and it is kind of the same this year. And then I also found a really kind of eyebrow raising stat involving Marshall's wide receivers. We talked about it a lot ad nauseum before the season started that the receiving unit had a lot of question marks. Well, this is why. Because, I mean, they got a lot of young guys, got a lot of inexperienced guys, and they've had some struggles this year. I mean, you kind of knew it was coming, and the fact that Obialo missed basically the whole year doesn't help the matter because he was the projected number one receiver. But this stat right here I found is pretty crazy. This is taking into consideration just wide receivers, not tight ends, not Xavier Gaines, who plays every position, just solely wide receivers. The wide receivers for Marshall this year have caught 87 balls. 87.
In the season. Yeah.
In the season.
On the season.
Think about how many players Marshall's had. One guy has at least had 87 catches. Think about that. Tommy Schuler had 2 straight seasons of 100-plus catches, and then he had a 90-plus catch as a senior. Think of like Darius Watts and Josh Davis and Denero Marriott and all those guys. They could do 87 catches in their sleep. I mean, now I understand Isaiah Green's not Byron Leftwich or Chad Pennington or Rakeem Cato, but like 87 catches for receivers in 12 games. That's like 8 catches or so a game for receivers. It's not going to work. And like, yeah, Green struggled a lot this year at times, but like, you can't blame it all on him because a lot of that is the receivers just flat out aren't getting open. And, that it goes both ways. Like, Green's missing throws. Yeah, the receivers are messing up too, though. So, like, 87 catches for all the receivers combined. My God. I mean, and Obialo's only played in, 2 games, 3 games, and he's literally 4 catches away from being tied for the most receptions for wide receiver. And he's played in 3 games. Like, it's so bad. But, like, you understand it, sort of, because they have so much. So there was a lot of turnover with the receivers this year, losing Tyree Brady and a couple of guys from last year. But, like, man, that's got to change next year. This offense is going to be more of the same. You got to have better receiver production than that.
Well, I do recall us, wrapping up a few games where we talked about some big, just clutch moment drops. And wasn't there a game earlier this year where they dropped like 3 touchdown passes or something like that, or potential touchdown passes? I don't remember.
Yeah,
but I do remember that there were a lot of drops in several games. And you can chalk a lot of that up to youth. And you mentioned Obialo missing most of the season. Hey, how about Artie Henry? He missed a lot of the season as well. And that was supposed to be, Artie was supposed to be a big weapon for Marshall. And, so the guys that had experience both missed extended amounts of time. So you were left with some unproven receivers, some young guys, and some transfers. So, I'm not making excuses. That's just fact. That's what Marshall was left with, Two of the actual wide receivers outside of Willie Johnson, there really wasn't anybody that I can think of off the top of my head that had sustained wide receiver experience for Marshall that was going to be playing this year. So you better hope that was just this year, and that next year, those guys kind of develop and become more sure-handed, because, this season, and if Marshall gets a bowl win, this is basically a mirror image season from 2018 to 2019. It's like the same season over again. We saw stellar running back play. We've seen excellent defense, and we've seen, average quarterback play over the last 2 seasons. I mean, it's the same thing. And Marshall, I don't think it's a coincidence that Marshall's setting at the same record this year that they were setting at last year. I don't think that's a coincidence. So
I want to piggyback off that real quick. I'm glad you said that, because talking about how the quarterback play's basically been the same from this year to last year. Well, I was on ESPN and I hit on Isaiah Green's profile and it showed the stats. Man, like, they're really close. Like 2019 to 2018, last year he had 187 completions. This year he has 180. Last year he threw 330 passes. This year he threw 313. Last year his completion percentage was 56.7. This year it's 57.5. Yards passing, last year 2,459. This year 2,265. Average, completion or whatever, 7.5 to 7.2. Last year is a little more. Touchdowns last year 15. Touchdowns this year 14. Interceptions last year 10. Interceptions this year 9. Quarterback rating last year 128.2. This year 127.3. Like, I mean, those are almost identical. And, like, you would have, considering he played in more games this year and he's a sophomore, you would have expected more of a jump than that.
I just think that definitely speaks to the fact that a dedicated quarterback coach is vital in Huntington.
Retweet.
Vital. And if you can't see that, if you choose to not see that, then I don't know what to tell you. If those stat lines that you just ripped off, it just says there was no like development, no improvement of any note. Nope. Yeah, you didn't get worse. I mean, well, technically you kind of did, because you put the same numbers up in more games. So you did kind of get worse. It is what it is, but I think a quarterback coach will make a world of difference in this for this Herd team. So, wow, that was something else. That was really something else. All right, so hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to get Steven in here, and we're going to relive the 69th edition of the 100 Miles of Hate that saw Western Kentucky victorious on its senior day in Bowling Green. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
They start on the ground. It's Brendan Knox. The hole is huge. And Knox down to the 1. 24 on the opening play for Marshall.
Who else would you expect to go to than the leading rusher in the conference, the Knox? What an impressive run.
He gets it again. Knox up the middle. Touchdown Marshall. The Herd win at home. And they are still alive for Conference USA's championship.
All right, we're back. It's time to talk about this senior day 100 Miles of Hate. Steven cannot join the episode this week due to some personal goings on, so we're going to try to pick up the slack for him. I mean, it was a pretty back and forth game for quite a while. It was a lot closer than I would have cared for. But as with most rivalry games, you just throw it out the window, man. It doesn't matter the records and the teams, and this one was one of those that, continued that trend of good rivalry play. Doesn't matter when they lock horns. You never know what can happen. Ultimately, though, in this 69th edition of the 100 Miles of Hate, Western Kentucky came out on top, 31-26, bringing their final record in the regular season to 8-4, 6-2 in conference, +5 in the win column from all of last season. And we still have a bowl game to go. I mean, Tyson Helton and Brian Ellis and those guys have done a phenomenal job to potentially go +6 in the win column in just their first year. It's an amazing job. But let's talk about this 100 Miles of Hate. Middle Tennessee, they beat the Herd earlier this year, and but other than that, I mean, they've been pretty bad. They end up being a 4-win team, 4-8, not bowl eligible, not going anywhere. So, to beat Middle Tennessee is not that surprising, but to only get a 5-point win. That was pretty surprising. Western Kentucky 31, Middle Tennessee 26. Indicators back and forth. Total yards, Western outgains Middle, not much, 474 to 466. Middle actually outpossesses Western Kentucky 33 minutes, 2 seconds to 26 minutes, 58 seconds. Middle also gets more first downs, 24 to 20, and Western wins the turnover battle. Middle Tennessee 2 turnovers, Western Kentucky just 1. At the half, this was a really, really tight game. As a matter of fact, Middle Tennessee was winning 13 to 10 at halftime. And then the second half came around, and the Tops got things started with a big 64-yard touchdown play to Lucky Jackson, which put the Toppers back on top. And the fourth quarter came in. A lot of scoring in the fourth quarter. Both teams scored 2 touchdowns. Western Kentucky had an opportunity to make it, have a bigger lead, but they kind of let one slip away from them. Roger Cray had a nice interception, very athletic play, which set the Toppers up in the red zone. Middle Tennessee's defense really stood strong and held them to a field goal attempt, at which Corey Monson ultimately missed. So that was a bummer. So this had the potential to get, a bigger lead in there, but still, you 5 points, 5 points. You take the win, it doesn't matter. But this game was it was really kind of a slugfest type game. Nobody could really pull away. And that's just something you come to expect when historic rivals kind of lock horns. Trace, I don't know if you got to watch the game. I was kind of watching a little bit of I had that game on the TV, and then the Herd game against FIU I was watching on my laptop. So once again, I had them both going, and it seemed like every time I'd look up, there was another score. Somebody was, so I'm like, man, I look down for a couple minutes, I look up, and then there's another score. So before we talk about stats, I don't know how much of it, if any, that you got to watch. But if you did, tell me about it. And of course, I know you can speak to just how it is when rivals lock horns. So let's try to give a little bit of a synopsis here, at least from maybe a Marshall perspective, about how this game played out, especially since, like we said earlier, that Marshall lost to Middle Tennessee earlier in this year. It was a self-destructed loss, by the way. We will acknowledge that. Middle Tennessee did not by any means go out and just beat Marshall. Marshall totally beat themselves with a bunch of turnovers late and getting stopped on fourth down and stuff like that. But still, Trace, if you happen to watch any of the game, just talk about it for a couple minutes, and then we'll talk stats.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't actually get to watch a single second of it because I was at the Marshall FIU game, and I don't know exactly what time the Western game started, but I know I think it started maybe midway through the Marshall game or something like that. It was somewhere around there. And of course, the Marshall game went into overtime, and it went a little longer and whatever, and getting home and stuff. And by the time I got home, it really wasn't. It probably was closer to being over, anyways. But yeah, it's like you said, though. Even though you would have thought that Western looked like a much better team, much superior team than Middle Tennessee this year, it's still a rivalry game, and you never can take them for granted because it seems like there's always something crazy that goes on, and you never know when the underdog in a rivalry game can come up and win the game unexpectedly. And Middle Tennessee they looked like they gave it all they had. They're not a good team this year, obviously, but I don't think anybody expected them to be much this year because they lost so much talent from last year. Their all-time best quarterback, Brent Stockstill, and everybody, and whatever. They might be okay next year because I like that O'Hara at quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but they really just didn't have a whole lot this year. But to Western's credit, even if they didn't win it by the margin that most would have liked them to have won it by, they still won the game. And they're still 8-4, 6-2, just like Marshall is. But the only difference is that Marshall was picked to win the East, and Western Kentucky was 3-9 last year. So it didn't take a very long time for them to get it turned back around. But yet Marshall's sitting there right in the same place they always are. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, it's definitely a good win for Western, even though I didn't get to watch any of it. But I really haven't watched a whole other games lately, just because I feel like there's always a game or a Marshall game on at about the same time. But,
well, you're right about that O'Hara kid from Middle Tennessee. He looks like he's going to be a real problem for Conference USA defenses. He's
problem for Marshall.
Well, yeah, he was a problem in this game as well. But he was of course a leading passer on the team this year, and I think he was the leading rusher for Middle Tennessee as well. And he was in this game for Middle as well. passed for over 300 yards, ran for 144. I mean, he's a problem. So,
yeah.
And he's just a sophomore. I mean, but the problem with that is you better be a tough cat, because if somebody gets a good lick on you and you go out, your team is basically ground to a halt. And in this game, he got a big hit laid on him. And to his credit, he bounced up. I mean, linebacker Kyle Bailey put a wallop on O'Hara, and he bounced up. I'll give him that. But man, that looked like it hurt. I bet he had some cobwebs there for a second. He needed to shake out. But for your perspective, I'll take it back to the Moonshine Throwdown. Remember when Amari Cobb put that lick on Ty Story, and everybody thought, "Whoa, same kind of hit." I mean, it was beautiful. The lick that Bailey put on O'Hara, but he got up. I don't know how. They probably would have if that were me, they probably just would have brought the sheet out and covered me up and, started doing the filling out the death certificate. I don't know if I'd have been able to get up from that. But anyway, let's talk about stats. Ty Story, great game, great senior day. Really proven to be one of the better, no pun intended, stories in recent Western Kentucky football history. I mean, he had one season to make the most of it, and he really, really has. Since he took the reins, he really became a leader on this team and somebody they could rely on most of the time. More ups than downs this season. 23 out of 30 in this game, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, QBR of 81.1, another 12 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Gage Walker, 14 carries, 119 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. Over 1,100 yards for Gage Walker. Played in the secondary last year. Comes in and he's an 1,100-plus yard rusher. Lucky Jackson, another big day. 8 catches, 110 yards, and 1 touchdown for that senior. And Quinn Jernigan, 4 catches, 76 yards, and 1 touchdown for that senior. I'd seen a stat that this was the first time in their careers, Jernigan and Jackson I'm talking about, that they both scored a touchdown in the same game. That's kind of hard to think about when both guys being seniors like that. Clay Davis on defense is the leading tackler for Western Kentucky, 13 tackles, 7 of those solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss and a pass defended. The aforementioned Kyle Bailey, 11 tackles, 8 solo, and one of those just a hit stick, man. It was beautiful. D'Angelo Malone, 7 tackles, 3 solo. Stop me if you've heard this before. 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss in a quarterback hurry. And Roger Cray, I mentioned that 1 very acrobatic interception. He had a couple of tackles also, but I could not get out of here without mentioning that awesome interception. Corey Monson, rough day, field goal kicking, just 1 of 3, solid on extra points, 4 of 4. Came on really strong in the beginning of the season, kind of became a little bit more of a average kicker towards the middle end of the season. But remember, he's just a freshman, folks. I mean, this time last year, he was finishing up his high school career. Bright future for Corey Monson. You got to think that he's going to become one of the best that Conference USA has to offer in the next 2-3 years. Or, well, I shouldn't say in the next 2 to 3 years, but by the end of the next 2 to 3 years, he'll be one of the best in Conference USA. John Haggerty, three punts for 46.3 yard average and a long of 57. Another first-year guy, the Aussie. He has just made quite the impact on Western Kentucky special teams. So, a decent all-around day, which ultimately culminated in a 31-26 win. I mean, I just can't get over this. 8-4, man. Tied for second, technically, I get. Well, tied for second if you look in the standings with Marshall in the East, but technically, of course, the Herd is in second place all by themselves because they own the tiebreaker over Western Kentucky. But, man, what a job. It's going to be really, really, really interesting to see that once these coaching carousel moves make their moves and guys land wherever. Stevens talked about it several times throughout the season, as if the Toppers will be able to hold on to Clayton White because he's done a fantabulous job with that Western Kentucky defense. It's going to be really, really interesting to see if he remains with Western Kentucky or if somebody comes calling. We've seen that, several times with Marshall defensive coordinators, several in the past. I mean, this is the third year I think they've had 3 in the last 4 years. Is that right? Chuck Heater left a couple of years ago, and then it was Adam Fuller left last year. So this is first year for Price and Lambert to be co-defensive coordinators. So, quality defense will get your defensive coordinator hired away from you in a heartbeat. That's for sure. I'm going to talk about some grades here, Trace. Quarterback play this week. I mean, what else can you say? 294 yards, 23 of 30, 2 touchdowns, 3 total. I got to give Ty Story an A, man. Great senior day effort. I mean, closing out the regular season, last game in Bowling Green, Kentucky. What a way to go. Nothing but an A performance. I mean, God, what a great effort this year from Ty Story. Once he took the reins over, it was, easing into the offense, and more they opened the playbook up more and more, and he became more and more comfortable. And, we talked about it that hopefully by November, late October, the Toppers would really be looking good, and they really did. They really looked like a really solid team. Offensively as a whole, 31 points, which, eclipses that magic number that we always seem to hover around, which is 30. That's enough to get another win. The Toppers left some points on the board. I mentioned that interception that they took over in the red zone and could not put any points on the board. So offensively, I mean, almost 500 yards of offense. That's nothing to sneeze at. But still, leaving the points off the board is enough to give me a B+ effort. I mean, I can't if you don't leave those points off the board, it's an A all the way. Especially when you talk about 500 yards of offense or pretty close to it. And 20 first downs means you're moving the ball, but stop leaving the points off the board there. Defense played pretty good. Couple of guys had some pretty big days. Another average game for D'Angelo Malone, which average for him is far above average for everybody else. Defense, I got to give them a B-. 26 points to Middle Tennessee is not something you want to see. Over 440 combined yards for Asher O'Hara is not something you want to have happen as well. But, he's done that to a couple teams this year, but still, it's slightly above average effort for me on the defense for Western Kentucky. Special teams, punting was all right. Nothing of really any import to talk about in the return game. But, you talk about 1 of 3 on field goals. 4 extra points, that's a different thing, but leaving the points off the board, 1 of 3 on field goals is I mean, I'll give you a C+ for special teams. Haggerty did a really good job. I like the 57-yard long on the punt, but no extravagant, exciting plays in the return game. Really just keeps the grade down. I mean, nobody did anything to hurt anything really, but just stronger field goal kicking will help out. The coaching effort, anytime you can get a win in a rivalry game, I mean, that bumps you up almost a whole letter grade without a doubt. Offensively, they look pretty good. Some nice big plays there. The 64-yarder to Lucky. Gage Walker over 100 yards. The defense outside of letting O'Hara kind of have his way. I like the coaching effort. I'll give them a B-. But, it's just O'Hara is the one that keeps it down a little bit. Overall, this is a solid B game. This is a solid B+ game, really. Closing out senior day with a win in front of your home crowd. I wish there were more people there. The announced attendance was only like 7,500, 7,600 people. But they probably actually had 7,500. They don't really fudge their numbers at Western Kentucky. That's one thing that they've proven over the years, that they will report accurate numbers, like people walking through the gates, not just tickets sold. So overall B+ game. You win a rivalry game. You're 1-1 against your rivals this year. You get to 8 wins in the regular season. I mean, that's amazing. +5 in the win column. What else can you say? Nothing left now but to figure out where we're going bowling and who the opponent will be. So once we find that stuff out, we'll have a nice little bowl preview episode. So the big question is, what do we know about the Toppers after the regular season? Look, the Toppers in November are a completely different team than they were in August and September. It seems like that loss to Central Arkansas was a different team in a different season at a different time and place. This is not the same team that lined up in week 1 for several reasons. Personnel-wise, mostly the same, with the exception of a quarterback. I just can't say it enough. Plus 5, man. The big turnaround in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They are really on the upswing. They're going to be serious contenders for the conference next year. They will be one of the East favorites without a doubt next year. And once we, get to see how the coaching carousel plays out, and will Lane Kiffin get another job? Will Bill Clark still be at UAB? Heck, will Skip Holtz still be in Ruston? I mean, who knows? Who will anybody else be fired? I mean, we'll have to see how the dust settles once the smoke clears in this Conference USA coaching carousel. But you've got to think right now that the way Tyson Helton has this team playing and some of the talent that they have returning, they're going to be considered contenders for the East Crown. So definitely what I know, this was a fast-track rebuild. A lot of folks picked the Toppers to win 1, 2, maybe 3 games. Some of us are a little bit closer to the program and keep closer tabs on the ins and outs. We thought anywhere between 5 and 7 wins was completely doable. But get 8 in the regular season with the potential of 9 wins in the first year under Tyson Helton. This is definitely what I would call a fast-track rebuild. So, excellent game. Way to close out the season. Let's figure out who the heck we're playing in a bowl game and start making some travel plans, man. I hope it's in Tampa. If the Herd can't come to Tampa, I'd like to see the Toppers come to Tampa. That would be pretty cool. But we shall see. All we know now is that neither team will be going to the Bahamas. That's all we can say right now. Let's get out of here this week. Let's talk about some final thoughts. Trace, you can start us off. This ought to be juicy. So, Trace, what you got this week?
Well, it's, as they say, it's the most wonderful time of the year. And it's the most wonderful time of the year, not because of the Christmas season or the holidays. It's the most wonderful time of the year because this is the time of the year where Marshall fans argue with each other all the time. It's like the ultimate fan war. And I've never understood it. I don't think I ever will. It's like you see, I mean, I'm sure everybody saw some of my timeline, which I won't get into that, but I mean, you see it, like you said earlier, I think you said this earlier, it's like you can see it both ways. Like you can see the super fan, blind apologist, green goggled people. You can see that side of it, but then at the same time, you have to see the side of it for the people that are actually being realistic. I mean, you can be both. Like you can have some green goggled and you can be optimistic, but like you have to be real about what you're seeing. And like the fact is that like people get called out for having an opinion about the coaching and like not how they think the program's going, and then like the super fans are gonna like call them out on it, but yet they can say stuff and then they're not supposed to have anybody disagree with them. So like it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I was looking on message board, like doing that stuff a little bit whenever things get juicy. But I was looking on a message board and I saw some posts on there, one big post. And this, honestly, for my personal opinion of the situation, this hits on it 100%. And I'm just going to read a few lines from what this person said. And I think a lot of it definitely applies, and it's definitely my opinion. So, one of these quotes say, Marshall is its own worst enemy. How many decades was we play for championships, our motto, mantra, or whatever you want to call it? Now they want us to come to grips with the fact that existence is so tough that we can no longer expect to compete for division and conference titles in this horrible conference we play in. So that's one point, which I think definitely hits a lot. Here's another one. I'll tell you something else. You super fans are the true problem with this program. You have made this so personal and turned this stuff into family and made these coaches your idols and friends that you will accept any product they put on the field because you're being a true fan. No, you're being an enabler. You're the friend that refuses to tell their friend that they have a drinking problem and just allows them to drink themselves to death. Now, the analogy might be a little strong there, but you got to admit, it definitely hits the mark, I think. And another line in this. You honestly don't care if we win or lose. You are just happy to be there. You could be just fine being lovable losers, while the rest of us are not wired that way. We want the absolute best for our team and our university. We want to win. I mean, okay, yes, that's exactly what you should strive for. And this one also says, the part of that says this: you honestly don't care if we win or lose. You are just happy to be there. I mean, it's I don't get it. I don't understand the point of it. Why you would want to just kind of lie to yourself? Like, I don't know. The fact of the matter is Marshall's been a above average, nothing more, Conference USA team for several years. That's what they've been. 8-4, 8-4, 8-5. 3-9, you can whatever with that. But like the fact is, they've been a slightly above average Conference USA team over the last few years, and I don't see how anybody could really think that that's good enough. I mean, I understand like they're winning and like they have winning records and they do some good things every year, but like you gotta play for championship. I mean, you gotta freaking get to the championship game. Like, I mean, it just makes no sense to me why they can't get there. It makes no sense to me why fans are like just fine with anything that happens. I mean, what's wrong with wanting more? What's wrong with wanting to see more? What's wrong with wanting to see your team reach its ultimate potential? And it's like, and then like if you dare question what's happening, then it's like you're viewed as like a pariah and like your public enemy number one. If you have the guts to dare say anything about the coaches or like the fact that they're not living up to expectations. I don't understand it. There's probably more that I'm forgetting to say, and I'm sure I'll probably think of some more of it, but like that's this fan thing. Like, man, it's a very gray area. It's dicey. But I fall on the side of it where I'm not realistic about things. I'm not one of those that just think that everything's hunky dory and peachy and rainbows and sunshine all the time. If you're one of those people, more power to you. But those people are also the preachiest. And when you're getting preached at and told how to be a fan, people are going to resent you point blank. That's the fact of the matter. Don't tell me what I can say. Don't tell me how to be a fan. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. I don't care what you think. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. So for the ones that think that, and for the ones that call people out for that kind of stuff, you need to get over yourselves because you got issues.
Let me ask you a question. You could be the most loyal fan that there is. And I would like to think, I mean, you are a loyal fan, so this applies to you. At what point is 9-4 and no conference title and a bowl win just simply not enough for you anymore? Like, I've done that. No, I'm just saying, like, even I know it's for you, but I'm just saying, like, even the most, dude, I'm just happy to be here type fan. Like, when is that not enough? You're like, man, I've done that. We've done that.
I don't understand. I feel like asking some of those people, like, seriously, I'm very close to asking, if Marshall went 0-12 every year, would you even be upset about it? Because, like, I don't think they would be. I think everything would be. Oh my God. Like, I don't understand how you could have that mindset. And like, honestly, I don't want to get too in depth with that, but like, that's a loser's mentality. And like, that's a very complacent mentality. And I think that complacency is carried over into the athletic department to a degree. I think Mike Hamrick's complacent. I think Doc's complacent. I think they're just happy to be there, kind of. They're just resting on their laurels. They're just sitting there, they're just trying to maintain. They're not trying to get better. They're just trying to maintain. And I think a lot of fans see that.
Well, again, I'm not trying to cause rift or anything like that. I'm just asking a question because it just seems natural to me. Like, okay, we've gotten 8 wins, 9 wins for the past 3, 4, 5 years in a row. We haven't competed for a title. We've made it to a bowl and we've won that bowl. Like, I need a title. I mean, I don't get, like at your job, you're going to do the same job 5 years, 6 years in a row, putting out the same results, and your boss is not going to be like, man, you need to kind of up your productivity here a little bit. I mean, you said you want to raise. I'm gonna need to see a little bit more, from you. But and just again, I'm gonna pretend I'm gonna put my administrator hat on for a minute. And if I'm the administration, I absolutely love those fans that are okay with not pushing me to do more.
Yeah, because they can just sit there and sit on their hands and get away with anything.
Right. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying, like, if that were me, if that were my job and I were in that position, I would be pumped to not have added pressure from my fan base vocally saying this isn't good enough anymore. 8 wins is not good enough anymore. A bowl game is not good enough anymore. We have to see conference titles. Like, well, first of all, that type of pressure doesn't appear to be in place in Huntington right now.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And to the point of, 8-4, 9 and whatever going to bowl games, 80 teams can go to bowl games. It's not it's not prestigious anymore. I mean, all it is now, and that's what I think I said this on the last episode we did. The difference between like a team like Charlotte or Western Kentucky this year going to a bowl game and Marshall going to a bowl game is Charlotte and Western Kentucky. That's considered a very good thing, a very big achievement, because Charlotte's been bad. Western Kentucky was bad last year. They improved to the point where they can go to a bowl game. That's a big thing for this season and, building for the future. For Marshall, all a bowl game is a consolation prize because you couldn't take care of business and get to the championship game when you all had to win 2 games. That's all that is. It's a consolation prize. And, I don't see how people can, sit there and, think that it's anything more than that at this point. If you get to a bowl game along with a conference championship, yeah, then that's fine and dandy. But, after a while, no. I mean, they're just consolation prizes. And like I said, don't freaking try to tell me how to be a fan. Not everybody's going to be the same. Not everybody's going to be, the happy-go-lucky guy down the street that's happy with anything that happens. No, but not everybody's going to be that. So it just aggravates me, and I don't understand the mindset of some of them, these fans. But it is what it is, and it's so embarrassing to see fans going back and forth. And I know I kind of had that issue a little bit, but it's for a good cause. So
I mean, it exists in every fan base, for every team in every sport, everywhere in the world. We're always going to have this strife amongst fans, and that's fine. But, ultimately it's dude, you have to be okay with letting people be the type of fan they want to be. You can't control the entire fan base. You just have to let people be, have their own experience with their team. They're personally connected to it, however they're connected to it. And it's not the same as the way you are. So let them be the fan they want to be. And yeah, they can say whatever they want to say. And yes, you can take exception to it, but you don't get to tell them how to be. We're all adults here, They're just,
just delusional.
Weird. It's just a weird situation, man. It's just a weird situation. And it's attendance. This speaks to attendance. This is one thing where Marshall has always prided itself. It's been a hallmark of their program for a long, long time, and when that starts to fade, that should immediately raise questions whoa, something's going on here. Something's not working. The people aren't coming. They've always came. Even when the teams were bad, the fans were there. Even when it rained, when it snowed, they were still here. So something's changing. We got to figure out how to, right that wrong. But I don't know. Go ahead. No, I'm not stopping you. Go ahead.
I got one more thing to add to that. Here's a fun fact for you. I don't know why I always think of this, but I do. So 2007 season, that's one of the Schneider years. That was a 3-9 year. Marshall's homecoming that year against Rice. Rice was a 1-win team at that point, and Marshall was 0-7 at that point. That game drew over 31,000 fans. Marshall's had over 30,000 fans in the last few years, 3 times.
Yeah.
That's telling.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it is. You can't deny that there's a shift, and a lot of it can be attributed to, the rise in technology, and the at-home experience is far more enjoyable now than it was a decade ago. And, be that whatever you want to chalk it up to. But to me, nothing beats live sports. Nothing.
Oh, 100%.
Nothing beats live sports. If I could be, in a position to go to every game day in Huntington or every game day in Bowling Green, I would go, but I'm not a USF fan. I could go to games at, Raymond James Stadium I don't care. I'm not a USF fan. I don't want to go cheer for them. I don't want to see who they're playing unless they're playing, the Herd or the Tops, then I'll go, but I don't, but it bums me out that I don't have an opportunity to go watch them play. And yeah, I probably would be one of those fans that goes and, if it's raining and cold and dreary and nasty, I'll still go and I'll sit there and, I've done it before and I'll do it again. So, weather doesn't scare me off. So, hopefully we'll have some bowl announcements, some cool things we can talk about. We'll have a few topics, since we've only got bowl games to preview. Once we know who's playing where and what time, we'll preview those. And we'll probably touch on a few, end of the season type things that may or may not be going on. We don't know what news is going to break and things are going to happen between now and the next time we podcast. So maybe we'll have some cool things to talk about. But even if there's not any news that breaks, we'll have some topics cocked and loaded and ready to talk about next week. So I'll take us out. Well, I'll do Steven's part this week since he's not here, but I'll let you start us off. You can take us out this week, Trace, and then we'll get the heck out of here and prepare to work on a bowl prep episode. So take us out this week.
Go Herds.
Go. You still throwing the S in there. I love it. Go Herds.
All day.
Hashtag Go Herds. Go Tops. We'll see you next week. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.